So all diseases begin in the gut. Is that a bit of an exaggeration? Can that really cover every single thing that could happen to you? It might sound like a bit of a reach, but because, as you probably all have heard at this stage, we have trillions of bacteria in and around and on us. They absolutely dictate how healthy or not healthy we are and how quickly we respond to certain treatments, how well we absorb certain nutrients. Basically, every system in the body, how well you sleep, what your mood is like, how much energy you have, your appetite. Maybe it's an excessive appetite, maybe you don't have any appetite, maybe you feel a bit nauseous after eating. Whatever stage you're at, your gut microbes are the guys that really drive the whole thing. So even though you might think it sounds like a little bit of a reach, it genuinely does put its feelers out to every system in the body. So I'll throw a few things out there and you can have a think about that could be me, that could be me. Because when you think of all diseases beginning in the gut, you might think, well, that's diabetes and Alzheimer's and cancer and all those. And farther on down the line, those things, yes, very much are related to what happens in the gut, and Parkinson's and all these other cognitive decline conditions. They all are geared towards what's happening in the gut. But you also have to think about the smaller stuff that really mightn't even be enough to bring into the doctor or bring into the hospital, but things that make your day to day not as good quality as it could be. So think of things like if you're prone to sore throats or ear infections or dental trouble or itchy skin, flaky scalp, irritated eyes, maybe dry eyes or watering eyes, tinnitus, that's ringing or really uncomfortable sounds in your ears, odd nerve sensations or Bell's palsy, um, inflammation anywhere in the body. So joint inflammation, inflammation in your tummy, acid reflux, kidney disease, kidney infections. All of these things are traced back to your gut bacteria, especially. You have bacteria everywhere in the body, but the gut bacteria is where it really is anchored. And the reason why it's zoned in so much on that, if you think of when a baby is just developing at the very, very early stages, it's the exact same tissues that form the structure of the spinal column, the brain, that form the tissues of the gut. So you have a nervous system in the gut as well. It's called the enteric nervous system. But it's the exact same. You have counterparts for both. You have a glial cell in the brain, that's your immune cells in the brain. You also have immune cells in the gut. And in the gut, it's a slightly more challenging job or slightly more challenging role because if you think of the outside of the body, you've got your skin to protect you from the outside world. And it does a brilliant job. And for most of us, it's good. Some people have problems with eczema and psoriasis and other skin conditions where they get breaches in the skin. And it just means that other stuff that shouldn't come into the body can come into the body and cause inflammation or cause infection and so on. And it's only when there's a breach in the skin we realize just how valuable it is and how much we rely on it. And the gut is doing the same thing. It's meant to create a certain degree of a barrier between the outside world and the inside world. But if you think of it, the gut has a slightly more challenging role because we need to let certain things in. The barrier between the outside world and our inside world is a very, very thin layer. That's the gut wall. It's about as thick as an A4 sheet of paper. So super thin. And that's because you want things to be able to go across that barrier because you need to be able to take in nutrients and digest, absorb nutrients from your food. But literally just very tiny molecular structure thing, very, very tiny single cell structures, not big chunks of food. And where you sometimes hear people saying they've got allergies or they've got intolerances, a lot of the time that's because they've got maybe not the most solid gut wall. They've got a slightly porous gut wall. And then you're getting slightly bigger particles breaking through that shouldn't be breaking through. And it causes ruptions because you should be getting molecules going in, absorbed, digested, and then the nutrients get filtered out to where they're needed in the body. You shouldn't be getting particles of food, however small, they still shouldn't be getting into your bloodstream. And so if they do, it causes consternation, causes inflammation, and causes a lot of bother in the body. And when you're having problems like that, because it's spread all over the body, people often don't associate it with the gut. They say, well, I'm always getting sore throats, or I'm always getting mouth ulcers, or I'm always getting athlete's foot even, or anything like that. They're not linking the two together. It's got nothing to do with it physically. They say it's too far away. It's got nothing to do with it. But the root of it is going back to what's going on in the gut. So if you want to look at that as your blank canvas, the good news is there's so much you do about it, because what's the thing that we all do every day? We eat at least once a day, presumably 2 or 3 times a day, maybe even more. So you get to change up your gut microbiome every single time you eat. So there's always room for improvement. So don't feel I've been eating terribly up to now, or no clue what I'm eating, or eat fast food all the time, or drink 20 fizzy drinks, or whatever it might be. There's always a chance to amend that. So it's not a foregone conclusion that, well, if it's been bad up to now, it's going to be terrible for the rest of my life. Not so at all. Every meal that you have, you can change the outcome. And I think that gives you a certain amount of power, because you can then say, so if I add in a few more good ingredients and a few less not so good ingredients, I can turn the ship around. However slowly, I think it's better to do it slowly, because it's less of a shock to the body. Whereas if you try to introduce a whole new group of foods, a whole new way of eating overnight, it's too much to take on. You probably won't stick with it because it's too much of an upheaval. And it's a bit of an upheaval for the body as well. If you think of the gut microbiome is a population, and you're meant to have a really substantial population of good bacteria. And most of the bacteria, by the way, that are there, especially in the gut, they are good bacteria, or maybe commensal. So in other words, they're kind of neutral. They're freeloaders. They're not really doing a whole lot for you, but they're not doing any harm to you either. And then you get a handful that are pathogenic, they're problematic bacteria. But if you believe the ads that are killing 99.9% of all known germs, it creates this illusion that we're in a world of threat from all these bacteria. We couldn't live without bacteria. We wouldn't be here without bacteria. So we need them. So we need to feed them, we need to encourage them, and we need to have a healthy population of them, of diverse bacteria. So you want loads of different types. So even if you're taking something like a probiotic, you'll only get a handful of strains of bacteria. Whereas with a broad spectrum diet, you can really bring in a much more diverse array of bacteria, and that's what you want. You want lots of them, and a diversification of each type as well. So plenty of them and plenty of diversity. And the way to do that was to give you one point. If we only had 3 minutes at talk, I'd say eat more plants. No, goodbye. That would cover it, because if you can eat more plants, the more plant food that you eat, fiber is the key ingredient where your microbiome is concerned. They absolutely thrive on fiber. They really need that. Not fiber as in chunky bowls of very branny cereals, fiber from anything. So it could be from nuts or seeds or herbs or spices or fruits or vegetables. A little bit of green, maybe if you want. But you don't have to make that the be all and end all. Make it your colorful foods, your baseline. And the more colorful foods you can include, and if they happen to be things from less processed foods, all the better. Sometimes you might have a choice, and processed is not always bad. You get processed foods that are frozen foods. You get processed foods that are just dried foods, dried beans, and so on, dried herbs. They're absolutely fine. So in a pinch, don't be giving yourself any grief. You're saying, well, I made a curry, but it was frozen vegetables and it was dried spices and things. That's fine. That's absolutely fine. So give yourself a break if you're feeling I'm not quite hitting the nail on the head. Always we can look at trying to improve what we're eating and try to improve what we're doing. But if you're making any kind of inroads, that's a start, and that's brilliant. The other thing I would say, if you're feeling, well, I don't have much of a say in what the diet is because someone else is doing the shopping or someone else is doing the cooking or whatever it is. So you might feel you're a little bit limited in the menu. Again, that's okay. I would bring it back a couple of stages then to say this isn't even just about what you're eating, it's how you're eating. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you're eating and you're in a state of stress, you probably are better off either not to eat at all or just have a bite or two and leave it at that. Because when your body is in a state of stress or in fight or flight. It's not geared towards digesting food. If you think about it, if you're in a threatening situation in nature, the body is basically saying, we need to run away and survive. The last thing we want to do is sit down and have a picnic. Not a priority there and then. So it wants to send all the blood to your arms and legs to get you to move, climb up a tree, run away, whatever you need to do, curl up in a ball, hide, not digest food. So it's not sending blood to the digestive organs at that stage. So if you're stressed, if you're tired, if you're worried about something, you're preoccupied about something, someone has just cut you off in traffic, or you've had a difficult email at work or something, probably not the best time to have a huge meal. If you really are starving and you feel you must have something small. Chew it very, very well. And ideally, take a few breaths beforehand. Get yourself centered a little bit and gather yourself. And even put your hand on your tummy, because you do have that second brain, as the tummy is known as. So if your head is going 90 and it's thinking about, I should have said this, I should have done that, whatever, your tummy is kind of in that conversation as well. I know you're asking it to digest food, and it's looking at you saying, I can do one or the other, I can't really do both. And so you might eat the food, but you might feel afterwards, I feel very bunged up. I feel like I have a cement block in my tummy. My brain feels more sluggish. I feel quite tired. My joints are quite sore. My sinuses are bunged up. Whatever it may be, whatever your thing is, everyone seems to have their Achilles heel. So don't feel you have to eat, just because it's lunchtime or just because it's 6 o'clock. We always eat at this time. That's fine, but if it's not going to do your body any good, there's no point. We're eating for nutrition and to feed ourselves. And if we're feeling like we're under pressure, that's not the best time to do it. The other thing I would say is that because your microbiome will affect things like your mood and your sleep patterns, and your mood will affect your microbiome. It's a two-way street. If you've had a terrible night's sleep and you wake up and you're feeling absolutely wretched, probably not the best time to eat again. So I would say have a hot cup of water with lemon juice or something, or herby tea. Give yourself 20 minutes, do a bit of meditation, or write in a journal, or a bit of breathing or prayer or stretching or whatever your thing is, and then see how you feel. Give yourself a bit of space. So don't always assume I have to eat, I have to run out the door to do X, Y, Z. And even if you're not running out the door, but you're just not feeling great, give yourself a bit of time. Figure out where you're at, first of all, and then see if you're ready to have something to eat. Because it takes a bit of work to digest food. It's a lot of work on the body. It's very taxing. So if you're not absolutely ready to eat and you're not feeling, I'm actually hungry, don't force yourself to eat. It's minimally useful, and if anything, it's just giving your body more work than it needs to do. And if you wait a little while, you might say, okay, I got that thing sorted, or I did a bit of stretch and I'm feeling a bit better, or I had a bit of water or something. You feel a bit more aligned in yourself, you feel a bit more ready to take on the world. So that's probably a better time to have something to eat. And possibly you've related to that. Maybe you've had a situation where you say, yeah, I did have a day where I just wasn't myself and my whole system was in a knot, and the last thing to do was eat. But then once something was resolved or something was taken care of, you feel in a better position, you feel a bit calmer in yourself. So listen to your body. Your second brain is as important as your first brain. So your second brain is your gut. So if it's the case that's not happy, you mightn't get huge disease pathologies developing overnight, but over the course of time, all these little insults, as they're known to the body, will chip away at you, so that your body eventually says, I've been fighting all these little battles for you now for years. And then by the time you hit your maybe middle age, that's when it'll start to say, okay, I've got a bit of a bill that I've tallied up here for you, and there's an ulcer waiting to happen, or there's a bit of arthritis waiting to happen, or there's whatever it might be, recurring infections or migraines or whatever the thing is. So give yourself the benefit of the doubt that your body does actually know better. It knows what it's at, and listen to it every once in a while. I would say that with most things, but certainly with the gut, that's the foundation to keeping everything running smoothly.
I was at a thing on Saturday, actually, and your man was giving out that 2 people were standing up while eating. And he said, sit down. He says, you have to protect your spleen. Don't eat standing up. And one guy was like, was like, I'm fine, I'm grand. Like, what are
Yeah,
you fussing about? But this guy actually knew what he was talking about.
yeah,
And he eventually sat down, but he was quite strict in the matter.
yeah,
Do not
and
eat. Because a lot of people, they might say, oh, I'm going out in 5 minutes, I might eat something here, I'll have a
yes,
quick slice of toast, and they
yeah,
take it on the run.
yes. And it's a good point, Sarah, because there is in Ayurvedic medicine, there is a certain point that they make. They have an expression about better a crumb eaten sitting down than a banquet eaten standing up. And the reason they say that is because again, it's back to that rest or digest or fight or flight. There's kind of two different modes that the nervous system can be in. One is fight or flight, one is rest and digest. So if you're in a relaxed state, body's ready to digest food. Standing up isn't how the body perceives that you're relaxing. Standing up and perceives you're getting ready to do something else, like go out the door or head to work or have a shower, or you're in the middle of doing something. So
Mm.
even though we've really gotten in the habit here, it's rare enough that you see people that don't have a cup of something in their hand or a bag of something in their hand, and they're just munching away on the go. And traditionally, that wouldn't be how it was done at all. You sit down and you'd have your kind of set meal times, but you'd sit down to eat, however basic a meal, sit down to eat it. And in Ayurvedic medicine, they'd be very, very against eating on the go like that. And not just there, in even in France, they'd kind of look at you. You know, we've really gotten into bags of food here, and it mightn't be unhealthy food, it might be bags of fast food, but eating on the go is a big thing here now, and it's the same in the UK and the same in the US. Whereas if you go to France or if you go to Italy, they're just not inclined. They still have their long lunches where possible, and they'll sit down and they'll eat, and they might even have a couple of courses of lunch. But you can, of course, get pastries on the go, burgers on the go, but
Mm.
it's still a bit culturally a bit frowned upon. It's like, why would you do that? Why would you do it to yourself? But you
It's
won't
very
enjoy
interesting. Yeah, it's very interesting actually, because
it.
you don't think, like, I mean, I would sit down 90% of the time when
Mm,
I, but if you were going somewhere and you bought something to eat, and you were
yeah,
walking to whatever, you might just say, oh, I'll take that bar while I'm going up to see such and such, and you'd
yeah,
walk up the road and you'd be eating the bar.
yeah,
So
yeah,
it's actually, yeah, that resonated with me a bit. Not
yeah.
that I would do it very often, but still doing it
No,
at all isn't really great.
that's it. I mean, I do it myself. I might grab an apple and I'm eating an apple going off the road. Not the hardest thing to digest, maybe. But again, in Ayurvedic medicine, they'd say, well, why are you eating raw fruit in the middle of winter? You know, so they
Yeah,
would
yeah,
just say,
yeah,
there are
yeah.
certain things that we just take for granted as that's just normal. And in other bits of the world, they've devised whole medicine systems around you don't eat raw stuff. You just it's too much hard work for the body. So it depends. If someone's got a very robust constitution and they're very well built, they're sturdy, they've big ruddy complexion, big loud voice, they have a different constitution type. They can handle a lot more than maybe someone who's a bit deficient, gets cold hands and feet. Maybe they're prone to coughs and chills and colds and sore throats and things like that. That type of person doesn't do well usually on raw food. So even though the textbooks might say the raw food diet is the way to go because it's way more high in nutrients and you haven't cooked everything out of it, from an energetic point of view, you're dealing with food that is cold. So your body not only has to digest it, it now has to warm it up first as well. So you have to have a kind of an oven chamber in your belly to warm it up. And because we tend to eat so fast now, there's very little time to actually warm the food up. We don't chew enough. We don't sit down lots of time to eat. So we have this very cold food arriving into the tummy, and now it has to turn it all up and try and make use of it. And the other thing is back to what I was saying earlier, you need to have very, very tiny little particles in order to absorb nutrients properly. If you're not chewing well, it's not getting broken down properly so that the body can then absorb it to get the most use out of it. So there's multiple reasons not to have food on the go, cold foods, standing up, eating, that kind of thing. It's just not helpful to the body. It's sending two messages to the body at the same time. Go and do
Yeah.
stuff or sit down and digest stuff. And it gets muddled and it gets confused. And it's often the reason why a lot of people say, I'm exhausted after I eat. Because the body's just fighting a bit of a battle that it doesn't need to fight, especially if you already have some health things going on. The body's
Mm.
already doing an amazing job trying to juggle and spin loads of plates. And then you're throwing another one at it and saying, now catch this as well. So you just don't want to tax it any more than you absolutely need to. I suppose that's the bottom line.
Excellent, excellent. Thanks very much.
Yeah, no problem. Some comments coming in there.
Yeah, there is. There is.
Mm.
I get itchy skin all over once a month. Maybe I never linked it to my gut. What can
Oh
I
yeah.
do to prevent it? Thank you. That's Sandra.
Well, if it's all over, certain points of the body represents different organs. So we'll say the fronts of the shins. Sometimes people say they get really itchy on the fronts of their shins, and they tear the skin. It would like be really, really frozen. That's usually related to the liver. So if the liver is a bit congested, you need to maybe flush out the liver with like yarrow tea or something like that. As a basic, if there's itchiness anywhere in the body, it's often liver related anyway, because
Oh,
that's one of the signs of liver being a bit congested. It doesn't mean that there's anything seriously wrong with it, but it's just
Okay.
struggling a bit.
And
So
what
we'll
can I?
say,
Oh,
hmm?
sorry. I'm sorry. Excuse me. What can I eat then for that? Sorry to disturb you. Hi, I'm Sandra.
Hi, how are you getting on?
Hi.
One of the handiest things that's a great all-rounder and is just so good for the gut anyway and good for your bacteria is raw apple cider vinegar.
I've
So,
just started taking that, funnily
oh,
enough.
brilliant. Excellent.
Yeah, I
Well,
got sugar-free vegan ones in a tablet form, so I'm hoping they're okay, and I'll take it every day. Fantastic.
lovely. Well, normally the handiest thing with apple cider, because it tastes quite sharp, and
Yeah.
there's a benefit to when things taste a certain way, there's a benefit to not masking it. So very often we'll say someone might say, "Oh, I tried that yarrow tea, but I had to put loads of sugar in it because it was a bit
Oh,
tangy."
yeah. No.
No, but it's because it's bitter. It's good for you. It's
Yeah.
it. We tend to not eat enough bitter foods anymore. Bitter is a really good tonifying food for the
Oh,
spleen
okay.
and the liver. So traditionally, even vegetables would have been a lot more bitter before. We've kind of bred them now to even Brussels
Yeah.
sprouts aren't that tangy anymore. They're not bitter anymore. So they've been bred to become sweeter. Everything is now ultra sweet. Plus we add sugar to things. Plus we like sweet cakes and biscuits and treats and things. So there's a bit of an imbalance towards way too much sweet and maybe not enough
Yeah.
bitter, acid, those kind of things. So if you can bring in more things like apple cider vinegar, lemon juice is a good one as well, obviously enough
Oh.
water or whatever. Any of those things that make your mouth kind of pucker up a little bit.
Oh,
You
yeah. Okay.
don't get enough those kinds of flavors anymore. And what happens when that puckering up happens, that sends a message to the brain. It's more than just a localized sensation in the mouth. When you get that need to salivate, the brain sends a message to the tummy to say, "Oh, I think there's food on the way. We better start releasing some hydrochloric acid so we can break things down." And then that in turn goes further down. The message says you need to release some bile because there's going to be food coming in a while. So it's this whole chain reaction of things that happens
Wow.
purely
Okay.
based on what's happening in the mouth, which is another reason why we shouldn't eat on the go, because you want to be paying attention when you eat. What
Yes.
effect does it have? Whereas if you're staring at a screen or you're running up the road or
Yeah.
you're
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 not concentrating on your
you're
food.
not
Yeah. No.
concentrating, and your body kind of suddenly says, "Oh, right, food. Okay, I didn't realize it would have been nice to
Yeah.
get a note about it for it." So by tasting certain flavors, it triggers the brain to say, "There's food on the way. We need to get ready," and it completely alters how your whole digestive system is ready to take on food. Then, so if it's the case that you're doing a lot of eating on the go or not very mindful eating, there's a screen involved, or you're in the middle of a very heated debate with someone about something, your body tends to hold on to a lot of that food. It doesn't really digest it. It kind of ferments it. So if you've got fermentation in the gut, what happens is the not so good bacteria, which are just waiting for a bit of fuel, they'll suddenly say, "This is great, putrefied food. I've never seen anything as tasty in my life." And they will gorge on that. And then you'll get a proliferation of the bad bacteria. So it's not so much obviously putrefied food is bad for you, but it's not so much just that food is bad for you. It's that it's feeding the bad bacteria and it's giving them a chance to get an upper hand where you're getting things like maybe a little ear infection or itchy skin or scratchy throats or that kind of thing. It might be big, big stuff, but a few fungal things or that kind of thing. So you want to just tweak the pH back in favor of things that taste acid often have a kind of alkalizing effect in the body. So the sugary things have an acidifying effect in the body, but the bitter things like the apple cider and the lemon juice, they tend to have an alkalizing effect. So more of those, and a bit more just awareness of what you're eating, when you're eating, if you're stressed when you're eating, if you're tired when you're eating. Those kinds of things make a huge difference. And portion size is massive part of it, because if, like I say, you've been trained maybe from childhood to clear your plate, eat all your food, and you mightn't even be hungry anymore. So you might have been full when you were a third of the way through the plate, but because someone had piled up the plate, you go, oh gosh, I better finish this. And you're not even that hungry anymore. Your body's kind of said, I'm done. I have enough. That'll do. But you're still eating because you feel you should clear the plate. That's not a reason to finish the plate, particularly if it's just a plate of starchy stuff like chips or pasta or rice or mashed potatoes. It's very, very quick release food in terms of the energy production from it. So you're getting an awful rush of sugar into the bloodstream very, very fast. And then a sudden drop. So after you've eaten, then you might say, oh my gosh, I could sleep. I'm wrecked. And it doesn't do anything for your long-term energy bank. It doesn't release energy slowly for you. So I would say just be careful what you're eating and how you're eating it, and what's the context around it. Are you tired? Are you worried? Are you not even hungry? You're just eating because it's the right time of day. You're meant to eat. All those things come into it as well, which is good, because they're all things that we can have an effect on ourselves.
Okay, so there's another question.
Mm.
Have been recently been recommended to wear a stomach binder when eating to help support blood flow for digestion. Never heard of that.
No, that's unusual. That almost sounds Victorian, doesn't it?
Doesn't it?
Doesn't. What I would say when it comes to blood flow and digestion, one of the easier things you can do, and one of the things that is a bit more sustainable maybe than having to wear a particular thing, if you think about your day-to-day routine, and I don't know how active or not active you are, but if it's the case that you're saying, well, fatigue limits what I can do in terms of activity levels, there's a couple of things that are really, really important for your overall health anyway, but especially with digestive health and with the looking after the health of the gut. How you breathe is just so important, because if you're shallow breathing, so all your breathing is just right at the top of your chest, or if you're a mouth breather, so you're puffing and puffing through your mouth all the time, the mouth really is kind of for eating and talking. The nose is designed for breathing because it's so much smaller than the mouth. It's got little hairs to filter out any dust or particles. It traps those particles so they don't get into your lungs. Plus, it is a way more convoluted route. Because it's narrow, it filters in the cold air and warms it up a bit so that it's not arriving into the lungs cold. And so it's a much more relaxing way to breathe. By breathing through the nose, even if you try it now, if you're used to breathing through your mouth, and if you breathe slowly through the nose, it doesn't have to be a big shoulders up thing. Shoulders up is more, it's got nothing to do with how you breathe, because your lungs are down here. So you don't have to move your shoulders at all. But if you want to put your hand on your tummy, and as you breathe in, just gradually through your nose, you'll see your belly rise up a little bit and sink back down a bit as you breathe out. So it's not a big dramatic movement at all. It's very subtle. But what it is doing is massaging all the internal organs. So as you're breathing, before you eat, this is, and obviously more than just before you eat. If you do it all through the day, even better. But certainly before you eat, as you're breathing, you're helping to massage those organs and tonify the organs, and you're getting the blood flow moving, but in a very gentle way, a very easy way. So that is one thing I would say. Just be aware of how you're breathing. Are you breathing? Even some people just go around there holding their breath for most of the day because there's just tension there, and maybe there's chronic pain, or maybe they're just exhausted, so they're trying to just brace themselves to stay upright for long enough to sit at the table to eat. So breathing is the last thing in their minds. Whereas if they stop to take a breath, they might feel, oh look, I actually am able to relax a little bit and release a little bit of energy. And in the process, it gets the blood flowing to the digestive organs, which are not just the gut. That's also the spleen, the liver, and all of those play a part in how you digest food as well. The other thing you can do, if you're very stationary for most of the day, and I've been using a wheelchair for the last week, I had surgery a few years back, there's been complications. So I'm sitting down a lot more than I would have before, even though I'm still doing physio and whatever. If it's the case that you're sitting down for a lot of the day, your lymphatic system is the system of the body that drains out any sludge and gunk and infections and so on. The difference between your blood vessels and your lymph system is your blood vessels have valves. They've got a giant, very effective pump called the heart, which pumps the blood all the way back up the veins and right around the body. So it keeps everything moving and ticking over. The lymph system relies on movement, or it doesn't really move. It doesn't really have that veins and valves and vessel system. It's very much just tubes with little nodes, but there's nothing to move until we actually move. So you might think, well, I can't move. I'm not able to move. I don't have the energy to move. I'm not talking about big movements at all. I'm talking about can you twirl your wrists? Can you play the piano with your fingers? Can you draw a circle with your chin? And a small circle I'm talking about, not cranking your neck out today. Can you roll your shoulders? Even those small movements, if you put a reminder in your phone to say, well, at least once an hour, do a little something, twirl your ankles a little bit. Any movement at all, can you maybe move your rib cage up and down a little bit so you're kind of tilting yourself from side to side and back to front? All of those things, but they'll move your lymph glands, so that'll help to get things moving in terms of if there's any sludgy old, because that's what your lymph system does. It processes old sludgy stuff out of the system, and if it's just sitting there, it can't get it out of the system. But also it gets your blood system moving a little bit. It gets the blood pumping just a tiny bit. So rather than to use something external, I would say, well, can you use your breath firstly? Because breath is very powerful. There's obviously way more extreme, powerful yogic breaths you can do that are very dramatic. But I'm talking about really simple abdominal breathing. And then very, very simple, small movements. Just if as much as you can, and whatever you can, maybe there's certain things you can't move, but as much as you can you move your fingers? Can you move your wrists? Can you just twirl your elbows? Can you roll your shoulders? Those little things make a huge difference, because it just means that things aren't pooling. And if things pool, that's when they stagnate. It's like a pond of water. If it's just sitting there stagnating, that's when it gets a little bit unhealthy. So you want a certain degree of movement. It doesn't have to be hyperactive movement. It can be very subtle movement, but regular, consistent movement is the key.
Okay, so there's another question. How much raw apple cider vinegar ought to be taken daily, and the best way with water, for example?
Yeah, you can start with very little. So even if you really find it very sharp, start with half a teaspoon. So very, very little. And in warm water, ideally, not boiling water, but just warm water. I would always say just ditch the ice completely if you can across the board for any beverages. But certainly this time of year, don't be having cold things, because it's like putting a bucket of iced water over your head first thing in the morning if you decide I'll have an iced coffee or something first thing. And even if it's something good like vinegar, if it's in freezing cold water, it's just too much of a shock. Your body just goes into a kind of a spasm. It just doesn't react well at all. Whereas if things are at least room temperature or body temperature, it's much easier for your body to say, oh, I can use this, I can digest this. So start with a tiny amount. If it's only half a teaspoon, it's better than nothing. And then work up to maybe a teaspoon, maybe even a tablespoonful. But that's probably enough. You don't need to be taking loads of it. A little bit of warm water, and not even a full glass. If you had half a glass or whatever of warm water, and just sip on it before your breakfast. So if you're doing a few shoulder rolls, or you're waiting for the breakfast the porridge to be ready, or the kettle boil, just sip away in it while you're doing that. It doesn't need to be a big amount.
And would you, to protect your teeth, do you use a straw, or is it okay? Like, I mean, I know I've been told before, use a straw, but
yeah, I think it's fine. You see, some people will say, well, if it's good to you, I'll just take a neat and get it done fast. And then it would be too abrasive for the teeth, because it's a bit acidic and corrosive that way for the enamel. But I would say if it's like diluted in water, it's totally fine. You don't need to use, unless you've really sensitive teeth and you just find it uncomfortable. But you might find the cold water is actually more uncomfortable than the apple cider. So I would say put a little bit of apple cider in some tepid water, and you should be good to go.
And would it make any difference if you've had treatment for cancer? Is there
In a
any
good way or a bad way?
Well, would it have a bad? Do you need to protect yourself a little bit more when you've had treatment for cancer, say?
No, what I would say with apple cider is just fermented apple juice and nothing else in it. And one of the benefits with apple cider is that it's an alkalizing substance. And for a lot of people who've had cancer, they've had an over acidic body. Their body has gone into the other extreme. It's making things too acidic. So I've never heard any reason why you'd have to be careful with that. Also because apple cider is really good for the liver. And usually if someone has had cancer, the liver needs a bit of a clean out anyway. So if anything, I would say apple cider is a good one to bring in as a regular part of what you do every day, I would say.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Okay, another question. They just keep on coming.
Good. Questions are great.
My gut feels like it's healing now, as I seem to be able to increase my food repertoire.
Excellent.
But I suspect I had mast cell activation
Activation.
before Christmas.
Mm.
MCAS is
Yes.
probably a whole other conversation.
Yeah, we could take a fair bit of time on that one. All right. So that's a good point about the expanding your repertoire of foods, because for a lot of people who've had issues with, I eat something, I get a flare up. I eat something, my tummy's at me. I eat something, I get migraines. I eat something, my joints are sore, or whatever the connection is. And so a lot of people, you have to kind of become your own detective. And a lot of people, by becoming their own detective, have said, well, I've eliminated this food and that food or that food group, and I think I'm feeling a bit better. So now I better try the next food group and see will it make me a little bit better again. And so a lot of people have ended up having to eliminate so many foods. And like I said, you want a diversity of bacteria. And to get a diversity of bacteria, they need different types of foods. They don't rely on just one food, even if it's a good food, even if it's broccoli. They don't just need broccoli, they don't just need kale. They need all of the stuff. So the risk is, because people say, well, I'm starting to feel better, I better not rock the boat and introduce these foods again. They get a very, very narrow band of foods that they feel are safe foods. And what's actually happening is the less foods you have, you have to feed bacteria, or like anything, they're living things, they'll die. So you get a certain amount of bacteria that just don't live anymore because you're not feeding them anymore, because they're down to a very narrow little base of foods. And so if someone then tries to introduce, we'll say, beans or something that they haven't eaten in months, but it was a trigger food. Suddenly, I felt wretched after those beans. I was in an awful state. Never again, not touching them. My joints were all over the place. I had a headache, whatever. Possibly that's because the bacteria that digest beans, which are different from the bacteria that digest broccoli or kale or kiwis or pears, they're not there anymore. So if you don't have the population to digest them, we talk about digesting our foods. We don't really digest them at all. It's the bacteria that do all the work for us. So if you haven't got that population to digest that food, it will cause you problems. And people then get scared, saying, well, I can't eat food anymore. It's the opposite. You can eat it, but in very, very small doses, because what you're trying to do is get that population built up again. And like I said earlier, every time you eat, you can influence the population of your gut. So even if you don't have any good population left of a particular strain, you can build it up again by feeding them. And you also want to feed them with prebiotics. So it's not just about probiotics. It's what foods create the right environment for them to thrive. So things like artichokes and onions, garlic, any of the foods that have soluble fiber and insoluble fiber, to some degree, some oats, depending on how sensitive you are. So when you're talking about expanding your food repertoire, it's something you can do, and you do it gradually. So if you have had issues before, mast cell activation is basically where you've got security guards right through your gut. And they do an amazing job because, like I said, they have to discern between, well, what's self, what's our own cells, and what's foreign. And unfortunately for the gut, everything is foreign because everything you eat is coming in from the outside. It's not part of us until we digest it. But the gut has to be able to say, yeah, but is it foreign and dangerous or foreign and beneficial, like kimchi or sauerkraut or something? So if you can start introducing a little bit of diversity, and that could be, you have a couple of green beans, you've got a stalk of broccoli, you've got one or two almonds, you've got a little bit of sauerkraut, whatever the small things are. Some people say, oh, I can't handle fermented foods at all. They cause me to flare up. Small amounts are better than nothing because you'll build up population as you go. And then you'll find, actually, I can eat that food and I want to. What you might find is you'll develop a taste for it. I miss my cider vinegar. If you're away for a few days and you didn't get to have it, you say, I kind of miss that flavor. Or if you've gotten used to the flavor of kimchi or sauerkraut, you'll miss it if you don't have it. So rather than craving the sweet stuff, you might still want sweet stuff, but it's not dictating your whole life. So you're not being governed by it. Whereas once you have a kind of craving for the good stuff, it's quite a strong pull to have those things, and you go seek them out a bit more. So don't force it. Don't have huge portions, but have very small amounts. A bit like if you're trying to get a toddler used to eating different foods. Just put out a selection of different things and see what they want to gravitate towards. So you might say, actually, I've got a figari for olives for some reason, or artichokes, or whatever, something a bit obscure, and just go with it. But don't have half a jar. Just have one or two. Another couple of days later, and mast cell activation will only come about when the body feels it's in high dough about something that it doesn't need to be in high dough about. It's reacting to something it really doesn't need to. And it can get very confused messages because it's the protein element of foods usually that cause a bit of a reaction. And a lot of the time, those proteins will mimic some part of the body, like whether that's thyroid cells or even gluten will mimic our own myelin sheath on our nerves. So if someone is sensitive to those things, and they've maybe eliminated those foods, you will get some degree of crossover, like certain dairy will trigger certain gluten sensitivities and vice versa, or corn or egg even in some people. So even though you might say, but I'm not eating any grains, but you might have had something egg, or you might have had something dairy that just made this hypersensitive security system in your gut say, there it goes, kill it, and it'll kill it at all costs. So it will also kill your healthy tissue in the process of trying to make sure that it secures away this threat, this damaging food. So it takes a while to break down that activation loop. But if it's the case that your body's on high alert, it could be that it's just reacting to things that aren't threatening at all. They're not dangerous at all. It's just it's lost the ability because it doesn't have the right bacteria anymore to break it down. So you have to send it back to school again. You have to introduce everything very, very gradually. And the less processed, the better. So if you can just have fairly plain stuff for a while, but just make it all about plants, make it about the herbs, and that can be anything: dried oregano, black pepper, a bit of turmeric, any of that, ginger, cinnamon, add it to anything, soups, breakfasts, whatever you're having, just to make sure you're getting plenty of those polyphenols, plenty of those antioxidants.
Okay, so Mary's asking, any supplement recommendation to tackle siblings?
SIBO maybe, is it?
Sorry, yeah, SIBO, Jennifer.
SIBO.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, I said
So,
Sorry.
yeah, I don't think they've invented the supplement to tackle siblings just
I
yet.
know,
But
yeah, I was
I'll
told
let you
that
know if I
if
hear anything.
we had something for that, we'd be rocking.
We'd all be honest. We'd all be honest. So where Steve-O is concerned with small intestine, and most of the bacteria in the gut is in the large intestine. But it's not that the small intestine has no bacteria, but it shouldn't have a huge population of bacteria. And what happens sometimes is there's meant to be a little a door, effectively, think of it as a door anyway, between the small intestine and the large intestine. And if it's the case that for some reason that valve is a bit lax or a bit loose, what you get is some cross contamination of things that should be in the large intestine ended up in the small intestine. It can also happen if your overall system is a bit prone to bacterial overgrowth. So SIBO is just small intestinal bacterial overgrowth. And it's called overgrowth because, like I said, there shouldn't be that much bacteria in there. There's no part of the body is fully sterile, but there shouldn't be a lot in there. And what happens when the small intestine gets too much bacterial overgrowth is you get well, apart from pain, discomfort, distension, you'll also get a lot of systemic problems. So inflammation is a big one. And with any foods that you eat, you can either switch on pro-inflammation or switch on anti-inflammation. And if it's the case that your diet maybe is geared towards using maybe cheap vegetable oils or refined white flours or a lot of just regular dairy, those kinds of things, they tend to be real triggers because there's no fiber in there, so they're not feeding any of the good bacteria to keep the ones that are meant to be thriving healthy. And instead you're feeding the fermentation that we mentioned earlier, that putrefied process that we don't want happening. So when it comes to SIBO, I would say that yes, you can take various supplements. There's all kinds of protocols for SIBO, but one of the handiest I think that you can do is managing when you eat and what windows of time you eat for. So some people will do kind of an intermittent fasting where they'll just limit the amount of hours that they eat. And the reason for that is because you've heard of peristalsis, where the body is digesting food and is gradually working its way through the various different muscles in the digestive tract, or forcing the food down until it reaches the large intestine and it's excreted from the body. But you have another entirely separate process that's also happening in the gut, and it only happens when you're not eating. So while peristalsis is reacting to the fact that food has just arrived and needs to be shunted through the body, the other process is only the cleaning crew that comes out when the digestive system has a break. So the benefit of not eating for a while is that cleaning crew gets to come in and sweep up and tighten things up a little bit and take down some of the inflammation if there is inflammation there. So I'd always say be careful with fasting for long periods of time, especially if you've never done it before. Don't be doing days and days of fasting, and especially at this time of year. But if it's the case that you can limit the times that you eat, so maybe your breakfast is a bit later, maybe you don't have breakfast till 10 or 11 or something, and maybe you finish eating about 6. So you have an awful lot of hours when the body can just properly rest, digest the food that's there, and clean up some of the imbalance that's in the gut, both the small intestine and the large intestine. That's probably one of the more profound things you can do, because if you're taking a supplement, you probably take it for 30 days or 60 days or however long the course is for, and then you're back to square one. Whereas if you can alter how you're actually eating, that has much more prolonged, sustainable effect on the gut, if that makes sense.
Okay, next question. Can we get our gut bacteria assessed some way, or is it trial and error?
Well, no, you can, but I do know of people, even people who work in the field of gut science. That's all they do, morning, noon, night, and they have had their own guts analyzed. So it doesn't sound very pleasant, but you send a stool sample and they'll assess it and see what you've got in there. And because certain waste products will be released from certain bacteria, and some of those endotoxins actually that are produced by bacteria are very, very damaging for the body. So you get things like lipopolysaccharides. So they're basically, if the body isn't breaking things down very well and you are getting fermentation going on, the body is meant to excrete things out. It's meant to get rid of things when it's gotten all the useful stuff out of it. It's meant to get rid of the waste. If it doesn't get rid of the waste and it goes back into circulation, that's when it causes you problems. So anyway, as I was saying, if you've got a lot of these lipopolysaccharides or whatever in a sample, they'll show up. So it'll show up that you're high in Prevotella or you're low in Akkermansia. There's so many different bacteria. They all have very flouncy Latin names. Some are fantastic, some are slightly more problematic. But I know of people who work in the field of gut science. They've sent samples and they've got radically different answers from the one person. Wow. So depending on what labs are assessing and how they're calibrated, they're getting very different readings. Plus, it's a little bit like probably when you have blood tests. A blood test is true there and then in that moment. It's a snapshot. But that could change in a heartbeat. So literally what you eat, how stressed you are, how you're breathing will affect a blood test. So you could have a test done now, another one 20 minutes later. It won't be exactly the same. Yeah. So I think there's probably an element of that as well with the gut bacteria. So yes, you can have it assessed. There are some things I would look at, because it costs money to get assessments done, and you could put a lot of stead in that, and then you're chasing your tails. Now I need to buy the supplements because they told me I'm high in
Yeah.
this or low in that or in excess of the other thing, which is really information that is very useful if you can back it up with months and months of protocol that, could be quite expensive. So if it's the case that you say, no, I have the budget, I don't mind spending the money on getting the test done, then by all means, yeah, it can kind of scratch that itch if you always thought, I kind of thought there was a bit of this or a
Yeah.
bit of that. But I would say, can you start with the basics? And the basic would be you want the best population, as in the healthiest population, and the most
Yeah.
diverse population in your gut of the good bacteria. And
Mm.
if you were to look at the various trials that have been done from, we'll say, there was a group in Burkina Faso, in Africa, of children, and then an equivalent age group of children from Italy, Florence, I think, and they compared their gut bacteria to see what they had gone on. And they were like, they're from different planets
Right.
because
So it is
the
related to what you eat.
unprocessed,
Yeah.
hugely unprocessed diet in Burkina
Yeah.
Faso gave no additives in anything really. It was very much, no, very simple. It was very much a bit of a kind of a gruel made of polenta or whatever, and a bit of plantain, and it was quite simple. There might have been a fermented milk or something in there as well, but there wasn't a whole lot of diversity. But there was enough in there that they had managed to build up enough of a really strong, good bacteria.
Wow.
So
Okay.
really, really not the most diverse population, but a really strong population. So these kids were super healthy. But then the Italian kids, you build yourself for whatever environment you're in. So they had just been brought up on white pasta and
Yeah.
little milk and cookies type breakfast with, pastries and things. So there was very little fiber in there, very little plants in there. And it was shown in terms of bacteria that was there. So you can almost do it, you can retrospectively do it. You say, well, what are you eating at the moment?
Yeah.
And how much color is in there? Because you want to get the colors of the rainbow on your plate as much as possible. And
Okay.
like I said, even if it's the case that you say, hang on a second, I can barely leave the house. I'm not doing the shopping. I'm not doing the cooking.
No,
Give
it's
me a
okay.
break.
I have someone to shop for me. I'm looking.
And well, even at that, I would say, can you get frozen berries? They might be organic, but start with where you are. Can you get frozen broccoli? Can you get frozen cauliflower? Even one of the best
Yeah.
foods for your brain. Even though it's white, there's no major color there, but it's a really, really good food for the brain. So it's also really good for the gut. Can you include some dried herbs? Can you include some turmeric, some
Yeah.
cinnamon, and so on and so forth? So it's these little things that you're gradually introducing that will
Yeah.
start to bring a good population back again. So rather than start with I better find out what's missing so I can feel I've done a bad
Okay.
job.
Just
I need
make
to
sure it's
improve
all good stuff.
it. Yeah, bring in more good stuff. And I never tell people to stop eating anything. So if someone says, but I love my donuts every morning, I'd say, okay, well, before you have the donut, can you have the apple cider vinegar and wait
Yeah.
20 minutes? And then after you've had that, maybe at night, can you have some psyllium? So at least you're having some extra fiber in the day. And then with your dinner, can you add in one extra portion of vegetables this week?
Yes,
And
easily.
maybe next week, two extra portions, and so on and
I
so
know.
forth.
I love
So
it.
whatever you're currently having, there's always room to add something else. So if you say, but I already eat 9 vegetables at my dinner, you say, well, can you put in an extra herb? So, or can you
Yeah.
put in a
Thank
vegetable you've never tried before or something like that? So I would always say, try to get a diverse diet going first. Look
Okay.
at
I
how
have,
you're
I think.
eating, chew everything really, really well to make sure you're getting the most benefit from. Try not to eat when you're stressed. Try not to eat too late at night is the other one because the
Yes.
body is
I
trying
know. I've
to,
just started that. I'm
yeah,
not eating after 6, and in 2 days, it's amazing the difference it's made.
yeah, it really is incredible and it's so simple. And there is a bit of that where because there's no money to be made out of telling people just, breathe better and sleep better and laugh a bit, watch something funny,
Yeah.
listen to a favorite song. If your mood is a bit before you eat, what's your favorite song? Put that on first and you'll
Yes.
instantly release a few endorphins and your body will feel a bit more, oh, I feel a bit more myself now. So
Oh, you're marvelous,
take
Jennifer. Thank you.
what any bits that you can change yourself basically for free, I would say start with those. And
Okay.
then if down the line someone says, no, there's still something radically wrong, then I'd say, okay, maybe we should just do at least one assessment. But one assessment on its own, if you get one bowel assessment done, you're going to want to see how it's improved 6 months down the line or whatever. So that's more cost than to compare one test versus the other test. So it's something that is worth doing and it's interesting to do, but at the same time, I don't think it's the only way to find out what's going on. I think you can kind of start from, well, I know the colorful stuff is good. I know the plants are good. And I know I need a bit of diversity. I know I shouldn't eat too late. I know I shouldn't eat when I'm stressed. All those things, my belly is like a rock. I need to breathe a little bit. Or something's bothering me. When people talk about having a gut instinct or a gut feeling, that's a real thing. So if there's something bothering you, you say, I'm just off my food. I don't feel myself. There's something off. Get to the bottom of that first and then get back to the food because the body will deal with it so much better anyway afterwards.